My name is Jonathan Schwartz, and we're putting together a video about the hows and whys of collaborative learning groups. This is my 15th year teaching, and probably in about my 12th year, a principal that I was working under came into my room, and she started talking to my students, and she asked them a question that wasn't scripted, and the students couldn't answer it. And I thought, well, you know, so what? My kids are doing great on standardized tests. Why would I want to change anything? And she said, look, the reason that your kids are doing really well on the tests is because of the power of your personality, but they don't really understand the material. And she said, well, why don't you try cooperative learning groups? When you walk into a classroom that's using collaborative learning groups, it sounds noisy and chaotic if you're used to top-down. You see kids getting up and moving around and writing down different answers.
Is this the right answer?
People think about cooperative learning groups. It sounds like some mushy-gushy, hey, let's just come up with whatever way works for you, and there's no right or wrong answers. Of course that's not the case. There are right and wrong answers.
12. So what's the answer? 4. So each one gets 4.
If you want to do cooperative learning groups, you have to know the standards, because you use the standards to form the material that you're giving the kids. The centers are not static, and they do change, and the cool thing about that is that when I feel like it's time to move on to another strand or another standard, then I make up a new center to address that standard. And I teach backwards. I go, by the end of the year, they have to be able to know how to do this. And I set up kind of a little timeline of how I'm going to get them there. And I make up material that helps them ask these questions of themselves. The first thing that I do in the morning is an hour of direct and explicit instruction. And during this time, I teach them the information and teach them how to ask the questions related to the material. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many edges does a hexagon have? So what does hex mean?
6.
You know, there's a lot of different methods that they can come up with to answer the questions. But I'm modeling the types of questions that can be asked, and I'm modeling the different types of ways that they can be answered. So then when they go into their collaborative learning groups, they can kind of imitate what I've been doing in my direct and explicit instruction.
Count the faces.
What I'm basically doing is I teach the kids how to teach others. A large portion of what I teach direct and explicitly is followed by these collaborative learning groups. I have centers already set up with material to what I just explicitly taught, and I've already trained the students on how to run the centers. I show them how to ask the questions and how to differentiate the instruction so that it matches the level of the students cycling through the center. And I also train them on how to deal with behavior management issues that come up. This promotes personal growth and flexibility and collaborative working skills. Once I have the students break into groups, I circulate through the centers and I monitor the center. I check to make sure that each student is engaged and that the material is being covered correctly, and I also check to see that the students are being grouped correctly. I often pause the groups and make suggestions based on things I think the groups or the center leader needs to act on.
Wait, I mean 19 plus 1 equals 20, and then...
But don't forget, he might know it, but these guys don't. So don't let him just answer it. What I want you to do is say, talk to your neighbor. That way everybody will get a chance. And then you say, who knows the answer, okay? Circulating through the centers allows me to check for student understanding, which is a great assessment tool. When I'm circulating through the centers, I can see how the students explain their thinking to their peers.
Okay, make 50 cents in 2 ways. 2 ways.
And many times, the students demonstrate verbal skills and cognitive understanding with their peers that doesn't come across on written tests or through their interaction with me.
You don't have to draw George Washington. I did it 2 ways. 2 ways. Okay. 2 ways.
It's not just about a teacher manual. It's not just about the state standards. It's about assessing what your students' needs are and making a determination and tailoring what it is that you offer and how you offer it on what they need and what works best this year, with the underlying philosophy of cooperation and collaboration.
When you're doing top-down teaching, you're filling them with the information, but you're not giving them a chance to digest the material. When you're doing collaborative learning groups, you're letting the students interact with each other, and because it's in a less threatening environment, they're more likely to take ownership of the material.
2010, 2020, 2030, 2031, 2032, 2033.
I had a student who came in last year. She was from Mexico, didn't speak any English. I speak a lot of Spanish. My wife's from Mexico, and I was going above and beyond to try to meet her halfway. But she was too afraid to take those risks. At recess, I would speak to her in Spanish, Mom. I'd meet with her dad, I'd talk to him in Spanish. My wife would actually come in once in a while and try to bridge the gap, and she was just like completely Mom. One day when I was saying, who wants to run the reading center, her hand popped up. She went over there, and it was like she lit up, and she started speaking English to me for the first time, and she was asking the questions that I had trained her to ask.
Name the characters. Juliet, the bear, and the kid. Good. Okay. What will happen next?
When I gave her the chance to become involved and take ownership of the material, she went from somebody who was a passive recipient to someone who was engaged in the material, and she was all excited about it. So, there's some kids who aren't going to turn on until you give them an opportunity to work with it independently within themselves. Then you've got a lot of other students who have very high intellectual spikes, but they don't have social skills. And collaborative learning groups require these children to modify the way that they deal with others so that they're more diplomatic.
I suggest you do it like this.
He came home one day, he said, I'm exhausted. I said, well, why? What'd you do today? Were you playing real hard on the playground? What's going on? He said, no, I was teaching in a learning center today. He goes, and gosh, it's so hard to teach people. I'm just so tired. And I thought that was hilarious.
It's like you flip the dynamic, and all of a sudden they see for the first time, gee, this is really hard to get people to work together and to listen and to learn. It helps them gain another perspective into the learning process.
Those cooperative learning groups in the centers help him to understand, it's not just about me, there's other people here, and how do I work with them? And he's gotten so much better. At the beginning, he was very self-centered, and now he can look and work with others much better, which is a tremendous achievement in just a short time.
You're really training kids how to get along in the world and how to achieve with many different types of people.
Collaborative learning groups affords everybody an opportunity to be the teacher. And it also requires that the other students pay attention to somebody other than me. When this responsibility is shifted to other students, everybody gets a chance to participate in a leadership role. It makes the class more cohesive. Everybody feels like they have a stake in the learning.
300,